Many cognitive theorists describe two types of thinking during adolescence, and that is intuitive thought and analytic thought. They believe that both of them are happening at the same time. They're both existing in the human brain. However, the fact that the adolescent brain development has an acceleration in certain areas and a lag in other areas makes them prone to think in one way that might be different than the way their parents think. So, intuitive thought is the thought that comes from it's an emotional or a gut feeling. It's a hunch that you have no explanation for, and it sometimes is influenced by experiences, and sometimes it's just your own temperament, and sometimes it's influenced by cultural assumptions. The analytical thought process is more ground to analysis and systematic thinking of the pros and cons and the risks and the consequences and the gains and the losses. So it is more slow and focused. During the adolescent years, few teenagers always use logic. They're capable of doing it. Remember, we said that they are becoming more logical and hypothetical and able to think in formal operational way. However, adolescents think quickly because of that speed of myelination. So the reaction time is actually the shortest that it's going to ever be during their lifespan, which makes them sometimes intuitive thinkers more than analytical thinkers. And we think of that as some sort of an impulsivity or what were you thinking? Well, it's not that they were not thinking, it's just that the thought process of a teenager, neurologically speaking, will allow them to make decisions that are based on social acceptance and um, personal satisfaction and pleasure seeking than ones that are based on the prefrontal cortex assessing the pros and cons and making a decision that might or might not be regrettable later on. So, with maturity, there's going to be a gradual balance between the analytical thinking and the intuitive thinking. So, we want to be in this area. However, even as adults, we sometimes do things irrationally. We sometimes do things because we just have a gut feeling for it, or we thought about it and we just went with our hunch. So there is not, the truth is, there is always a move from the intuitive to the analytic as you grow and as your prefrontal cortex matures. But at the same time, and this is what this dual processing theory proposes, is that both networks exist within the human brain and they are both happening, and we are constantly in the process of moving towards analytic, but really you can't really be one or the other. There are times in our lives where we resort to analytical thinking, and there are times in our lives where we resort to intuitive thinking. However, if we were to look at the teenage brain, you might be looking at a teenager who is not what we dub them as they're not thinking, but rather their evaluation of a situation is not the same as the evaluation of an adult or the parent. Their emphasis is going to be on certain things that might not be the same as the ones that the parent puts as priority. Their safety might not be prioritized as number one in comparison to, for example, social approval. And that's what creates those, sometimes we call them wrong decisions. But to give them credit, we have to also know that if it wasn't for that impulsivity and intuitive thought and quick action, we wouldn't have adolescents who are taking chances and rushing to action and jumping into a building and grabbing someone and saving them. So those actions sometimes are kind of clouded by how we think about the teenage brain or the adolescent brain and the way they make their decisions.